Welcome back to the deep dive. Have you ever felt this kind of shadow, something that just settles over your life and it won't lift? Or maybe you find yourself wondering if the sheer exhaustion you feel is, just stress, or could it be something much deeper? Well, this deep dive is definitely for you. We're tackling a really central, crucial question that came up from the material you shared with us. Am I depressed or am I just sad? Seems like for a lot of people, the heavy language around mental illness can almost create a barrier. It leads people to maybe dismiss really debilitating symptoms as just, oh, it's a bad mood or it's just a tough week. Oh, go.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to cut right through that confusion. We're using the evidence-based strategies and the detailed clinical insights from Dr. Jane Doe's material to give you absolute clarity on the difference between, normal sadness and clinical depression. We're going to give you some tools to sort of map the symptoms, explore those often hidden physiological links, especially that really vicious cycle involving sleep, and maybe most importantly, provide actionable, solid strategies for healing and also for supporting others. Okay, let's dive in.
That feeling, that overwhelming weight and the confusion you mentioned between a natural emotion and something more pervasive, it really is often the single biggest barrier stopping people from getting the right kind of help.
Yeah.
And we absolutely want to acknowledge the complexity here and, frankly, the vulnerability it takes to even ask this question. The material is very clear. Our goal today is to dismantle that misunderstanding. We want to show you the science behind what you might be feeling and really emphasize that structured, evidence-based recovery. It is absolutely, completely within reach. I think the key takeaway we're going to focus on throughout this discussion is making that necessary shift, moving from just sort of abstract self-pity, perhaps, to actionable self-awareness. We need to get past simply feeling down and really understand the symptoms, the underlying neurochemistry, and the structured strategies that actually allow you to regain function and build long-term emotional and physiological resilience. Okay, let's start right there then. The foundation, that distinction between sadness and depression. Because, in everyday conversation, we use them almost interchangeably. Oh, I'm so depressed, my team lost. But in psychology, they mean fundamentally different things. Why is it so vital we get this difference right? It's absolutely the most vital first step. Because mislabeling an illness as just an emotion, that prevents treatment. It stops people seeking help. Sadness is, well, it's a fundamental part of being human. It's healthy. It's natural. It's a necessary signal, really. It happens in reaction to a clear trigger. Grief, loss, disappointment, setback at work. It's painful. It's definitely real, but it's typically transient. What that means is, when you're sad, the feeling usually comes in waves. You can still access positive memories sometimes, maybe still experience a bit of humor or comfort, and eventually the emotion subsides. It allows you to re-engage with life. Think of sadness like a temporary but pretty powerful storm cloud passing through your day. The gloom is real, absolutely, but the sun still exists above those clouds, and it'll eventually peek through again.
I like that analogy, the storm cloud. So if sadness is that passing storm, what defines clinical depression then? Is the key difference the lack of a trigger, or is it more about the sheer severity, the functional impairment?
It's primarily the severity and the persistence. And yes, that leads to functional impairment, sometimes regardless of a clear initial trigger, though often there is one. Clinical depression, or what we call major depressive disorder, MDD, it's a pervasive, debilitating medical condition. It's not just an emotional state, not by a long shot. It affects your thoughts, your physical body, your behavior, even your neurochemistry. So the analogy for depression needs to be much more extreme. It's like lightly living in a perpetual winter. The landscape feels desolate. The warmth of the sun is just a distant, maybe unreachable memory. And the cold kind of penetrates right to your core, freezing your ability to act or even feel properly. And unlike sadness, which lifts, depression persists, weeks, months, sometimes years if it's left untreated. To meet the diagnostic standard, the one clinicians use, the DSM-5, requires a specific cluster of symptoms. You need at least 5 specific symptoms present during the same 2-week period. And here's the really crucial part. One of those 5 must be either a depressed mood or that marked loss of interest or pleasure in things. We call that anhedonia. And these symptoms can't just be annoying background noise. They have to cause clinically significant distress or really impair your ability to function in major life roles, work, school, relationships. It has to impact your life noticeably.
Right, that focus on function is key. That's what separates a temporary state from a chronic illness. The material you shared had those 2 really powerful contrasting stories that illustrate this so well, Maria and Sarah.
Yes, they're very illustrative. So Maria experienced healthy sadness after her grandmother passed away. Her grief was intense, absolutely. She cried often, she felt that deep ache of loss, and she definitely needed time to process it all. But crucially, even in her deepest moments of sorrow, she could still accept comfort from others. She could still laugh at a shared memory with her family. She found little glimmers of joy, maybe in a quiet evening or a cherished ritual. Her sadness, although very intense, had a clear cause. And though it lasted a while, it followed a natural, albeit painful, course of healing.
Okay, so that's sadness, even profound sadness. Now contrast that with Sarah.
Right. Sarah's experience was clinical depression. She felt this unshakable gloom for months, and often there wasn't even a recent major loss to point to as the single cause. She had complete anhedonia, that numbness to good things. She felt joyless even during celebrations or when she was around people she loved. She found it impossible to muster the energy or even the desire to engage with her friends or her work. That persistent, pervasive lack of joy and energy, that was the key indicator for her. It meant significant impairment. She just couldn't participate in her own life anymore. It was like she was watching it from behind glass.
Wow. It really sounds like sadness is a response that helps you process life events, whereas depression is more like a systematic shutdown that actually prevents you from processing anything at all. Before we dive into the full symptom list, maybe you could briefly touch on the other common forms of depression mentioned in the sources, because MDD isn't the only one out there, right?
That's right, it's a spectrum. We also have persistent depressive disorder, or PDD. This used to be known as dysthymia. Think of this as a chronic sort of lower grade depression. The symptoms are generally less intense than an MDD, but they last much, much longer, at least 2 years for a diagnosis. It's like this constant low hum of sadness or emptiness that rarely, if ever, fully lifts.
So more chronic, less acute.
Exactly. Then there's seasonal affective disorder, or SAD. This one is linked directly to changes in seasons. It typically occurs during the winter months, and it's thought to be related to the reduced exposure to natural sunlight impacting brain chemistry. And finally, postpartum depression, or PPD. This affects new mothers, and sometimes fathers too, actually, after childbirth. PPD is far more severe and persistent than the temporary baby blues many experience. It can involve deep feelings of guilt, despair, anxiety, and sometimes an inability to bond with or care for the baby. Recognizing these distinct forms just underscores that clinical depression isn't this single monolithic thing. It's a diverse illness with different presentations.
Okay, that's helpful context. So if someone is listening now, maybe recognizing themselves more in Sarah's story than Maria's, and they're asking, okay, is this me? What's the complete detailed list of signs they should be looking for? Let's maybe treat this like an observational guide for them.
Absolutely. And starting that self-assessment process, that takes real courage. It's the necessary bridge to getting professional help. So we look for a cluster of these symptoms persisting for at least 2 weeks, remember. The 2 cornerstone symptoms, as we've touched on, are paramount. You need at least one of these. First, the persistent depressed mood. This isn't just feeling sad occasionally. It's feeling sad or empty or down or maybe tearful most of the day, nearly every single day. It's an emotional state that just sticks around and feels impossible to shake off.
And the second one, anhedonia, that's where the volume gets turned way down on anything good, right?
Precisely. Anhedonia is the second cornerstone. It's a really noticeable decrease in interest or pleasure in almost all activities. So if you used to love painting or cooking or watching football, maybe spending time with friends, and now those things just feel flat, dull, or like an immense chore you have to force yourself through, that's anhedonia in action. Your brain essentially stops receiving the usual chemical reward, the pleasure signal, from those activities. It creates this profound emotional numbness that just robs life of its flavor, its richness.
Okay, those are the core emotional states. Now let's move past that to the physical side of things, which I think are often really misunderstood or missed.
Yes, the body absolutely speaks volumes in depression. The third symptom is significant weight or appetite changes. And this isn't just, skipping breakfast because you're busy. We're looking for unintentional shifts. This could mean a loss of appetite so severe that food just seems unappealing, maybe even nauseating. Preparing a meal feels overwhelming, and this leads to noticeable weight loss without trying. Or conversely, it could be unintentional weight gain, often driven by intense cravings for comfort foods, maybe carbs or sugary things, or perhaps coping through eating when feeling empty or bored.
And the fatigue, that sounds like more than just being tired.
Oh, absolutely. Fourth is the really devastating symptom of fatigue or loss of energy. This is not the tiredness you feel after a long workday or a poor night's sleep. It's pervasive. It's chronic exhaustion that feels physically debilitating. And crucially, it doesn't improve much with rest, no matter how long you sleep. Simple daily tasks, taking a shower, getting dressed, making coffee, They can feel monumental, like climbing a mountain. The material describes it perfectly. It's like your internal battery is constantly reading 5%, and every small movement requires draining what little energy reserve you might have left.
Wow. And the fifth symptom involves those motor changes, the psychomotor symptoms. Those sound like visible physical markers.
They are. They can be quite noticeable to others. We look for psychomotor agitation or retardation. Agitation means a visible restlessness. You might see someone pacing the floor, wringing their hands, unable to sit still, feeling really keyed up or fidgety. Retardation is the opposite, and it's often seen in more severe depression. It's a visible slowing down of movements, speech, and even thought processes.
Slowing down how? Like moving through treacle.
Exactly like that. If you're experiencing psychomotor retardation, you might feel like you're moving through thick molasses, or like you're wearing concrete shoes. You might speak more slowly, your responses might be delayed, even simple reactions feel incredibly labored. This isn't laziness, let me be clear. It's a measurable neurological slowing that other people can often observe.
Okay, moving into the internal experience now, the cognitive and emotional symptoms. How does depression distort the way we think, especially about ourselves?
It can profoundly warp self-perception. The sixth symptom is the intense manifestation of feelings of worthlessness or excessive guilt. This goes way beyond just low self-esteem. It's a deep, often distorted belief that you are fundamentally flawed, a failure, or inadequate. Or you might experience extreme guilt over minor past events, often blaming yourself for things that were far beyond your control, or ruminating endlessly on perceived mistakes.
This self-criticism or self-hatred feels incredibly real, but it's disproportionate to reality. It's one of the most destructive cognitive components of the illness. And that ties into the seventh symptom, the cognitive hit, right? The brain fog people talk about.
Yes, directly. The seventh symptom is diminished ability to think, concentrate, or indecisiveness. This is the clinical reality behind brain fog. You might find it incredibly difficult to follow a conversation. Maybe you can't read a page of a book without losing track completely. Or your short-term memory suffers forgetting why you walked into a room, for instance. And simple decisions, things like choosing what shirt to wear or what to have for dinner, they can become agonizing. This leads to decision paralysis, which makes everyday functioning incredibly difficult, sometimes impossible.
And finally, the eighth symptom. This is the one that serves as the most critical alert, the one demanding immediate action.
That's right. And we need to be very clear about this one. It's the presence of recurrent thoughts of death or suicidal ideation. This exists on a spectrum. It can range from passive thoughts, like wishing you wouldn't wake up or feeling like life isn't worth living anymore, all the way to developing specific plans for ending one's life. If these thoughts are present, even fleetingly, this signifies a severe medical crisis. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a symptom of severe illness. We must re-emphasize the critical importance of seeking immediate professional intervention. In the U.S., please call or text 988 immediately. In the UK, you can call Samaritans at 116-123. Please do not minimize this symptom or try to handle it alone.
Okay, that's a comprehensive list. When people start this journey of self-assessment, they often turn to online tools like the PHQ-9 screening questionnaire. You mentioned these are like preliminary maps. How should someone approach those tools? How do they use them wisely without accidentally self-diagnosing?
That's a great question. They are invaluable screening tools, but it's crucial to understand they are not diagnostic instruments. Think of an online assessment like that preliminary map, or maybe like a metal detector. It can suggest that there might be something significant buried under the surface. It can give you a sense of the potential scope. Does this look mild, moderate, or severe based on your answers? It provides a starting point for conversation.
But it's not the final word.
Absolutely not. Only a qualified professional, a doctor, a therapist, a psychiatrist, acts as the skilled guide. They can interpret that map accurately, but more importantly, they consider your full medical and psychological history. They can rule out other conditions that can sometimes mimic depression symptoms, things like thyroid issues, certain vitamin deficiencies, even other mental health conditions like anxiety disorders or bipolar disorder. The online test tells you where to look. The professional tells you what you've actually found and what to do about it.
That was exactly Mark's struggle, wasn't it? The 45-year-old engineer in the case study. He was sleeping 12 hours a night, but was still convinced he just had stress. He completely missed the underlying illness for quite some time.
Exactly. Mark's story is so common. He initially attributed his cognitive decline, the brain fog, the trouble concentrating at work, and his pervasive exhaustion solely to the intense demands of his engineering job. He was sleeping excessively, sometimes 10, 12 hours, but waking up feeling completely unrefreshed, groggy. And he noticed his beloved hobbies, things that used to bring him immense satisfaction, like coding complex algorithms or hiking challenging trails. They just felt pointless now. He had zero motivation for them.
So what was the turning point for him?
The real wake-up call was the increasingly erratic and chaotic nature of his sleep, combined with his appetite just vanishing. Food held no appeal. He finally, perhaps prompted by a concerned colleague, took an online screening test, and it flagged him for moderate to severe depression. His story powerfully illustrates how depression often masquerades as persistent physical symptoms like fatigue or cognitive failure like poor concentration. People end up seeking help for burnout or chronic fatigue when the root cause is actually a treatable mood disorder.
It's just so clear from everything you're saying that depression isn't just in your head or about feeling sad. It's systemic. It affects every single system, not just mood. Let's dive deeper into that core physiological connection, specifically the really intense, complex relationship between depression and sleep.
Yes, the connection between depression and sleep is absolutely foundational, and it's crucially bidirectional. This is key. It means they constantly feed into each other, creating and reinforcing a really vicious cycle that can rapidly intensify all the other symptoms. Sleep disturbances aren't just secondary effects of feeling low, they are core diagnostic symptoms themselves, and they are major factors in predicting relapse later on.
So what are the main patterns we see? Insomnia seems like the obvious one.
It's very common. We see two dominant patterns, starting with insomnia. This isn't just one thing either. It can manifest as difficulty initiating sleep, onset insomnia, difficulty maintaining sleep, waking frequently during the night, or terminal insomnia, waking much too early, sometimes 3 or 4 a.m., and being unable to get back to sleep. What's often happening is the mind, which is already riddled with depressive thoughts, negative self-talk, rumination about the past, or anxieties about the future, simply refuses to quiet down. This constant cognitive loop, this mental noise, prevents the deep, restorative stages of sleep that are necessary for emotional resilience. And when you're chronically sleep-deprived, your ability to handle even minor daily stressors erodes completely.
Okay, so that's struggling to sleep enough. But then there's the other side of the coin, hypersomnia, which seems counterintuitive. Sleeping too much. How is that part of depression?
Right, it does seem odd, but hypersomnia is also quite common. This involves excessive sleeping, maybe 10, 12, or even 14 hours a day, but the person wakes up feeling groggy, heavy, mentally thick, and completely unrefreshed. In fact, they often feel more tired after sleeping so long. This pattern is often thought to be, in part, a subconscious escape mechanism. It's a way to avoid the overwhelming emotional pain or the physical fatigue of being awake. You retreat into sleep.
But it doesn't actually restore you.
No, because the quality of that sleep is usually very poor. The reason it's not restorative relates to disrupted sleep architecture. During healthy sleep, our brains cycle through different stages, including deep, slow-wave sleep and REM, rapid eye movement sleep. These stages are vital for things like memory consolidation, emotional regulation, and physical repair. Depression, through its effects on neurotransmitters and stress hormones, chemically disrupts these normal sleep cycles. You might spend less time in deep sleep or have fragmented REM sleep. So, even if you're asleep for many hours, the brain isn't getting its necessary deep cleaning and reset. This dysregulation then further impacts neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, which further fuels the depressed mood, the concentration problems, the fatigue, and disrupts sleep the next night.
So the less quality sleep you get, the more vulnerable you are to negative thoughts and low mood. And the low mood and negative thoughts make it impossible to achieve that restorative sleep. It's a genuine trap.
It's a perfect self-perpetuating trap. And Mark Schiff, the engineer we talked about, from being an early riser to struggling with that erratic, non-restorative sleep is a classic example. He'd spend hours awake at night replaying perceived failures from work or social interactions. This led to extreme dread about facing the next morning. His professional treatment, therefore, had to focus not just on directly addressing the depressive symptoms with therapy and medication, but also on imposing strict sleep hygiene practices, things like consistent bedtimes and wake times, managing light exposure specifically to repair that foundational sleep architecture. You simply can't build a healthy, resilient mind on a constantly depleted, unrestored base.
Okay, that connection is incredibly clear. Let's widen the scope now to the rest of the body, beyond just sleep. How does this chronic emotional distress actually translate into physical symptoms? People often report aches and pains.
Yes, because the mind and body are absolutely inextricable. The emotional distress of depression manifests physically, primarily because it activates the body's chronic stress response system, specifically the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which regulates cortisol, our main stress hormone. In depression, the system often becomes dysregulated, leading to chronically high levels of stress hormones like cortisol circulating in the body. This isn't like the short burst of cortisol you need to react to danger. It's a constant low-level activation. This state promotes systemic inflammation and puts a significant strain on the body over time.
And that strain shows up how?
It translates into various somatic or physical symptoms, things like chronic aches and pains that don't seem to have a clear medical origin. Persistent headaches, tension in the neck and back, maybe unexplained muscle soreness. We also often see digestive issues like irritable bowel syndrome, IBS symptoms flaring up or worsening. That chronic physiological strain can also weaken the immune system, making someone more susceptible to catching colds or other minor illnesses. And very commonly, it leads to a significantly decreased libido or sexual dysfunction. The body is essentially diverting resources away from non-essential functions to cope with the perceived chronic stress.
And going back to the cognitive side, that brain fog seems to be one of the most feared impacts, especially for professionals or students who rely on sharp thinking. What exactly is happening in the mind there?
The cognitive impact can be severe and incredibly frustrating. It manifests most commonly as profound impaired concentration, making it nearly impossible to focus on simple tasks like reading emails, following instructions in a meeting, or even watching a TV show. Your attention just drifts constantly. We also see significant short-term memory problems. This causes immense frustration. You might forget why you walked into a room, misplace things constantly, or struggle to recall what someone told you just moments ago.
And the decision-making difficulty.
Yes, that agonizing difficulty with decision-making. That's not just normal indecisiveness. It reflects impairment in what we call executive function. This is the part of the brain, mainly the prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning, organizing information, filtering distractions, and making judgments. In depression, the chemical imbalances and reduced connectivity in these brain regions can temporarily impair these functions. So even trivial choices, what to eat, which task to start first, become overwhelming and can lead to intense anxiety or complete paralysis.
And emotionally, the sources were really clear that the spectrum goes far beyond just feeling sad or down.
Indeed. While a persistent low mood is central, we often see other powerful emotional states emerge. One is explosive irritability. The person might be constantly on edge, have a very short fuse, and snap at loved ones over relatively minor provocations. It's often described as sadness turning outward into anger or frustration because the internal pain is unbearable. Anxiety very frequently co-occurs with depression. This can manifest as pervasive worry, restlessness, a feeling of dread, or even physical symptoms like a racing heart or shortness of breath. The two conditions often travel together.
And then there's the numbness.
Yes, perhaps one of the most alienating and frightening emotional states is emotional numbness. This is a deep sense of detachment, an inability to feel much of anything at all, good or bad. Positive emotions feel blunted or absent, but even sadness might feel distant. This can be more terrifying than intense sadness itself, because the lack of emotional response makes relationships and connections feel hollow or meaningless. And finally, all of this inevitably impacts relationships through the social impact. The combination of anhedonia, lack of pleasure, and profound lack of energy leads almost inevitably to social withdrawal. Engaging with others requires immense effort that someone who is severely depressed simply doesn't have. While isolation might feel like a necessary coping mechanism in the moment, reducing demands, it tragically deepens the depressive symptoms in the long run. It eliminates external sources of support, validation, and positive interaction, creating a terrible social vicious cycle that strains relationships, sometimes to the breaking point.
Wow. The sheer complexity of this illness really underscores why we need such a multifaceted approach to treatment. The challenges are clearly immense, but the good news is the material provides clear, evidence-based paths forward. The first step, as you've emphasized, is getting professional help. Can we break down the different effective avenues within therapy?
Absolutely. Professional help truly is the bedrock of recovery, and understanding the options is empowering for anyone seeking help. First and foremost, we have therapy, or psychotherapy. And within therapy, the gold standard, particularly for depression, remains CBT, which stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. CBT is typically highly structured and focuses primarily on the present, on the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors happening now. It operates on a core principle, that your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are all interconnected and influence each other. So if you can change one aspect, like your thought patterns, you can positively influence the others, like your mood and actions. The therapist works with you to identify specific cognitive distortions. These are those faulty, often automatic negative thinking patterns that fuel depression. Things like all or nothing thinking, seeing things in black and white, catastrophizing, assuming the worst possible outcome, or personalization, blaming yourself for things outside your control.
Could you maybe give us a quick example? How might a CBT therapist help someone tackle that common distortion of viewing themselves as a total failure after one setback?
Sure. Let's say someone gives a presentation at work, and maybe one part didn't go perfectly. Their automatic depressive thought might be, I completely bombed that presentation. I am a total failure, everyone knows it, and I'm definitely going to lose my job. That's a cascade of distortions, magnification, emotional reasoning, fortune-telling. A CBT therapist would use techniques like Socratic questioning to gently challenge the evidence for that thought. They might ask things like, okay, you say you bombed it. Can you list maybe 3 things that actually went reasonably well during the presentation? Is it possible that making one mistake or feeling uncomfortable makes the presentation imperfect, but does it automatically make you a complete failure as a person? What evidence do you have for the idea you'll lose your job? What advice might you give a close friend if they were in this exact same situation?
Through this process, the aim isn't to force positive thinking, but to help the person reframe that automatic negative thought into a more balanced, realistic, and less destructive perspective. It's about teaching the brain new, healthier coping skills for interpreting events.
Okay, so CBT focuses on thoughts and behaviors now. What about other types of therapy mentioned?
Right? CBT isn't the only effective approach. Another well-established one is IPT, interpersonal therapy. IPT focuses more directly on improving relationships and social functioning. If the depression seems clearly linked to things like unresolved grief, difficult role transitions like becoming a parent, retiring, or losing a job, or ongoing interpersonal conflicts, IPT helps the individual understand and manage those specific relationship dynamics that are contributing to the depression. Then there's DBT, dialectical behavior therapy. DBT was initially developed for borderline personality disorder, but adapted versions have proven incredibly effective for depression, especially when it's characterized by intense emotional dysregulation, difficulty managing distress, or recurrent suicidal ideation. DBT teaches 4 core skill sets: mindfulness, being present; distress tolerance, getting through crises without making things worse; emotional regulation, understanding and managing intense emotions; and interpersonal effectiveness, assertiveness and relationship skills. A key concept in DBT is balancing 2 seemingly opposite ideas: accepting reality as it is, while simultaneously working actively to change it for the better.
That makes sense. And for moderate to severe cases where maybe the internal static or the symptoms are just too loud for therapy alone to gain traction initially, that's where medication often steps in.
Yes, exactly. For moderate to severe depression, medication, antidepressants, often plays a vital, sometimes essential, stabilizing role. These medications work by influencing the levels and activity of key neurotransmitters in the brain chemicals like serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine, which are involved in regulating mood, sleep, appetite, and energy. The goal is to help the brain's communication pathways function more efficiently. The most commonly prescribed types these days include the SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. These include medications like fluoxetine, Prozac, sertraline, Zoloft, and escitalopram, Lexapro. They primarily target the serotonin system. Then there are the SNRIs, serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, like venlafaxine, Effexor, and duloxetine, Cymbalta. These affect both serotonin and norepinephrine and might be particularly helpful if fatigue or chronic pain symptoms are prominent alongside the depression. There are other classes too, like TCAs, tricyclic antidepressants, but SSRIs and SNRIs are often the first line due to generally having fewer side effects.
What are the important expectations people should have if they start medication? It's not a magic bullet, right?
Absolutely not. It's crucial to set realistic expectations. Firstly, antidepressants take time to work. You usually won't feel the full benefit for several weeks, often 4 to 8 weeks, sometimes even longer, so patience is key. Secondly, finding the right medication and the right dosage is often a process of careful trial and adjustment in collaboration with your doctor. What works well for one person might not work for another, or might cause different side effects. Thirdly, side effects are common, especially when first starting, but they often subside as your body adjusts. It's important to report any bothersome side effects to your doctor. And finally, and this is critical, never stop taking antidepressant medication suddenly or without consulting your doctor. Abruptly stopping can cause unpleasant withdrawal symptoms and increase the risk of relapse. This is why combination therapy, using medication to help alleviate the most severe symptoms and lift the fog enough to engage effectively, alongside therapy, to learn long-term coping skills and address underlying issues is often considered the most potent and effective path to sustained recovery.
Okay, so that professional foundation therapy, maybe medication, is established. But the material heavily stresses that proactive lifestyle changes then shift from being just optional nice-to-haves to becoming powerful, evidence-based complements to treatment. They're part of the solution.
They really are. They become necessary tools not just for getting better, but for staying better, for long-term maintenance and relapse prevention. First on that list is exercise. It's genuinely one of the most accessible and potent natural mood boosters available. Consistent physical activity releases endorphins, those feel-good chemicals, sure. But more critically, research shows it promotes neurogenesis, the growth of new brain cells, particularly in the hippocampus, an area involved in mood and memory. It also increases levels of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which acts like fertilizer for your brain cells, promoting growth and connection. And we're not necessarily talking about running marathons here. Even consistent, moderate activity like a brisk 30-minute walk daily makes a measurable difference in managing depressive symptoms and reducing anxiety. Consistency is really the key.
And we absolutely have to discuss nutrition, especially that gut-brain axis connection, which I think is still frequently overlooked by many people. Absolutely crucial, yes. Nutrition, fueling the mind. The gut-brain axis isn't just a vague concept. It's a direct biochemical communication highway between your digestive system and your central nervous system, primarily linked via the vagus nerve. Your gut is lined with millions of nerve cells and produces a significant percentage of the body's neurotransmitters, including serotonin. So what you eat directly impacts your gut microbiome, inflammation levels, and ultimately your mental state. So what should people focus on eating or avoiding?
The focus should be on a diet rich in whole, unprocessed foods. Lots of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins. Fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, or sauerkraut can support a healthy gut microbiome. And importantly, healthy fats, particularly omega-3 fatty acids, are key. You find omega-3s in fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, and sardines, as well as in walnuts, flax seeds, and chia seeds. Omega-3s are essential components of brain cell membranes and have known anti-inflammatory effects that can potentially help mitigate some depressive symptoms. Conversely, it's generally advisable to limit processed foods, sugary drinks and snacks, and unhealthy fats, like trans fats and excessive saturated fats. These tend to promote inflammation throughout the body, including the brain, which has been strongly linked to mood disorders. Think of it as choosing brain-supportive fuel.
Okay, that makes sense. And for managing that persistent mental noise we talked about, the rumination that often keeps people awake at night.
That's where practices like mindfulness and meditation come in, and they're increasingly evidence-based. These practices aren't about somehow emptying your mind or stopping thoughts altogether. That's impossible. Rather, they're about changing your relationship with your thoughts and feelings. Mindfulness teaches you to pay attention intentionally to the present moment, your breath, bodily sensations, thoughts without judgment. This practice helps reduce rumination, getting stuck in negative thought loops, and lowers physiological stress responses, including cortisol levels. Even just 5 to 10 minutes of focused breathwork or a body scan meditation daily can begin to alter the neural pathways involved in stress, fear, and anxiety, gradually creating greater internal calm and cognitive clarity.
And battling the isolation tendency.
Yes, consciously working against withdrawal by fostering social connection. Depression screams at you to pull away, to isolate yourself. But genuine supportive connection is profoundly protective for mental health, making an effort, even when it feels incredibly hard, to spend time with trusted friends or family, sharing your feelings honestly, if you feel safe to do so, or even just engaging in a brief shared activity combats loneliness and reinforces your sense of belonging and value. Quality over quantity is key here. Okay, and finally, the really practical grounding steps. Routine and small wins. These are vital for regaining a sense of control and efficacy. A structured routine provides predictability and an external framework when your internal world feels chaotic and overwhelming. Things like having consistent wake-up and sleep times, scheduling regular meals, and perhaps planning out simple daily tasks can help regulate your body's natural rhythms, circadian rhythm, and reduce feelings of being adrift. And when motivation is practically non-existent, which is common in depression, relying on the strategy of setting small, achievable goals is crucial. Trying to tackle huge tasks feels impossible and just reinforces feelings of failure. Instead, break things down into incredibly small, manageable steps. So instead of clean the entire kitchen, the goal might be put 5 dishes in the dishwasher. Instead of write a chapter, maybe it's write 1 sentence or open the document. Celebrating these tiny victories, acknowledging the effort it took to do even that small thing, chips away at the pervasive feeling of hopelessness and starts to rebuild a sense of competence and self-efficacy. It proves to your brain that action is possible. David's story, the artist from the case study, really seemed to encapsulate this powerful combination. The foundational professional treatment opening the door, allowing those small lifestyle wins to take root and build momentum. Yes, David's journey is a great illustration. He was an artist completely crippled by anhedonia. He'd lost all interest and pleasure in painting, his life's passion, and he was suffering from severe insomnia. He initially resisted therapy and medication, perhaps viewing it as a sign of weakness or failure, which is sadly common. When he finally agreed to try a combination approach starting CBT and an antidepressant, the medication helped quiet some of the intense mental static and anxiety. It didn't magically fix everything, but it gave him a fractional improvement in his sleep and maybe a tiny bit more mental energy. That created the necessary foundation.
And that foundation allowed the other strategies to work.
Exactly. His therapist then introduced the concept of behavioral activation, using those very small, specific goals. For David, this meant things like taking short, gentle walks outside each day, adhering to a strict 10 p.m. bedtime, even if you just lay there initially, and critically, setting tiny, non-intimidating art-related goals. So not finish a painting, but maybe just clean one paintbrush today, or sketch for 5 minutes using only the color blue. These actions were so small they almost felt ridiculously easy, maybe even pointless at first. But by accomplishing them consistently day after day, David slowly started rebuilding the neural pathways associated with activity, reward, and eventually his connection to his identity as an artist and his passion for creating. The professional treatment created the capacity for change by reducing the symptom severity, but it was those small, consistent lifestyle actions that truly empowered his long-term recovery and the gradual reclaiming of joy and purpose in his life.
Okay, moving outward from the individual's journey, we absolutely must discuss the social dimension. How do we, as friends, family, or colleagues, effectively and compassionately help someone we suspect is struggling with depression? And also, how should we navigate the complex digital conversation around mental health these days?
Supporting a loved one through depression is, as the material suggests, often like running a marathon, not a sprint. It requires patience, empathy, and crucially, self-awareness on the part of the supporter. The first step is simply learning to recognize the signs in others, which, as we've discussed, can sometimes be subtle or masked. Look for those persistent changes. Ongoing sadness or low mood, yes, but also maybe increased irritability, marked withdrawal from social activities they used to enjoy, frequent expressions of hopelessness or worthlessness, perhaps a noticeable neglect of personal hygiene or appearance, changes in sleep or appetite, or maybe even an increase in substance use, alcohol or drugs, as a way of coping.
Okay, so you recognize some signs. What's the most helpful immediate action? People often want to jump in and fix it.
That's the instinct, but it's usually counterproductive. The most important immediate action is to listen actively and validate their experience. Resist that strong impulse to offer quick fixes, unsolicited advice, or comparisons. Oh, snap out of it. It could be worse. Have you tried yoga? These often invalidate the person's pain. Instead, focus on offering pure empathy and non-judgmental presence. Use phrases like, "That sounds incredibly difficult," or "I hear how much pain you're in right now," or simply, "I'm here for you." Your main goal initially is to create a safe space where they feel heard and understood, not judged or pressured. You don't need to have the answers. Just being there is powerful.
That's a really important distinction. And when it comes to suggesting they get professional help, which can be a delicate conversation, what's the most effective way to broach that without sounding critical or like you're pushing them away?
It is delicate. The key is to frame it supportively, as seeking expert guidance for a treatable illness, not as a personal failing. Because motivation and energy are often incredibly low in depression, you often need to encourage professional help and offer concrete assistance. Don't just say, "You should see someone." Instead, you could offer tangible help like, "Would it be helpful if I research some therapists in our area that take your insurance?" Or, "I could help you make the first phone call if that feels overwhelming." Or even, "Would you like me to drive you to your first appointment?" That practical assistance can help remove the significant logistical and motivational barriers that depression often creates.
And what about the long haul? Supporting someone isn't always easy.
No, it absolutely isn't. For the longer term, you must cultivate patience and persistence. Recovery from depression is very rarely a straight line. There will likely be good days and bad days, progress and setbacks. Your consistent, steady, non-judgmental presence can be an absolute lifeline during that process. Remind them you care, even if they withdraw. However, and this is absolutely crucial for the supporter, you must set boundaries and practice self-care. Supporting someone with significant depression can be emotionally draining. You cannot effectively support someone else if you become completely depleted yourself. Protect your own mental health. Seek your own support system, whether that's friends, family, or even your own therapist. You simply cannot pour from an empty cup. And the critical alert, again, what if someone mentions suicide? This requires immediate and serious action. If there are any suicidal threats or statements, you must take them seriously, every single time. Do not dismiss it as attention-seeking. Do not leave the person alone if you believe they're at immediate risk. If possible and safe, try to remove potential means of self-harm, like medications or weapons, from their immediate access. And, most importantly, seek immediate crisis intervention. Call emergency services, like 911 in the U.S. Canada, 999 in the U.K., or the designated National Suicide Prevention Hotline, 988 in the U.S. Canada, 116-123 for Samaritans in the U.K. Get professional help involved right away. Your priority is keeping them safe.
Jessica's learning curve, the friend supporting Emily in the anecdote, seems like an excellent illustration of putting this supportive framework into practice.
Yes, it's a great example of shifting approach. Jessica initially noticed her friend Emily's complete withdrawal and lack of communication. Her first reaction was frustration, maybe feeling personally slighted or ignored. But then, recognizing the other signs, Emily's persistent fatigue, her self-deprecating remarks, Jessica changed her approach. Instead of expressing frustration or demanding attention, she sent a simple, non-judgmental text acknowledging her worry. Something like, "Hey, I've noticed you've been quiet lately, and I just wanted to check in and say I'm worried about you. No pressure to respond right now, but please know I'm thinking of you and I care." When Emily eventually responded, Jessica didn't jump in with advice. She primarily listened, validated how difficult things sounded for Emily, and then, gently, she offered practical help specifically, offering to help Emily research and find a new therapist, framing it as a joint effort to find expert help for the exhaustion and low mood Emily was describing. Jessica learned through that experience that effective helping wasn't about her fixing Emily's depression herself. It was about being a steady, supportive, non-judgmental presence that validated Emily's struggle and empowered her to access the professional care needed for a complex neurochemical illness.
That's a powerful shift in perspective. Okay, finally, let's address the modern digital conversation. The rise of things like depression memes, dark humor accounts, and online communities sharing experiences is fascinating. What are the potential benefits, but also the potential pitfalls of using humor and shared digital content to talk about such a serious illness?
It really is a profound double-edged sword, and it reflects a significant shift in how we talk about mental health, for better and for worse. The significant benefits lie primarily in normalization and reducing stigma. When people see their own difficult, often isolating experiences reflected, even in a humorous meme, it can provide an immediate sense of validation. Okay, it's not just me feeling this way. It creates connection. For many people, especially younger generations, sharing or relating to a depression meme might be a low-barrier first step toward acknowledging their internal pain, maybe even to themselves. It can create a common ground and help articulate complex emotional states that sometimes feel impossible to put into words otherwise.
Okay, so validation and stigma reduction are the upsides. What are the dangers?
The pitfalls are numerous and quite significant. One major risk is trivialization. While humor can be a coping mechanism, dark humor online can sometimes unintentionally reduce a serious, potentially life-threatening illness like clinical depression to just a temporary bad mood, a personality quirk, or even a relatable trend. This can undermine the seriousness of the condition. There's also the danger of romanticization, where some online content might inadvertently depict depression as somehow edgy, deep, or poetic, rather than as the debilitating, painful, and unglamorous illness it truly is. This can be particularly harmful to vulnerable individuals.
And the risk of misinformation or unhelpful comparisons.
Absolutely. Misinformation can spread rapidly online. But perhaps more critically, online spaces, especially algorithms designed to show you more of what you engage with, can easily become echo chambers. If you're only consuming content that focuses on the hopelessness or negative aspects of depression, it can actually reinforce maladaptive coping mechanisms or negative thought patterns, potentially discouraging you from seeking genuine professional intervention or believing recovery is possible. The digital world can offer connection and validation, which is valuable. But it should never replace genuine introspection, objective assessment, and structured evidence-based clinical support.
So the bottom line is really a call for discernment. Recognize the potential validation, but understand its very real limits. Precisely. Use the online conversation perhaps to feel seen, to know you're not alone. But if the symptoms being described in those memes or posts resonate deeply and are persisting in your own life, That should be your cue to take the next step. Seek professional, structured help offline. Online content can be a reflection of pain. It is rarely, if ever, a sufficient treatment plan.
Okay, so we've talked about getting through the acute phase, but the fight doesn't end when the most severe symptoms start to lift. The material rightly stresses that for long-term health, actively building resilience and intentionally sustaining wellness is absolutely essential. This is the preventive maintenance phase, if you will.
Right. So, how do we turn those short term tools and insights we might have learned in therapy into something more concrete for the long haul? How do we build a robust relapse prevention plan?
That plan should really be thought of as your personalized toolkit for navigating future challenges, and it's best developed collaboratively with your therapist or doctor before finishing acute treatment. The first step is to identify your personal triggers. What specific factors or situations have contributed to past depressive episodes or significantly worsened your symptoms? Be specific here is it periods of extreme work stress, financial instability, relationship conflict, significant life changes like a job loss or a move, or maybe physiological factors like severe sleep deprivation or increased social isolation. By anticipating your known vulnerabilities, you can prepare preemptive countermeasures.
Okay, so know your triggers. What's next?
Second is learning to recognize your early warning signs. These are often subtle personal shifts that tend to precede a full relapse. They're unique to you. Maybe it's a persistent return of negative self-talk or a noticeable increase in fatigue even when sleeping okay. Maybe a sudden spike in irritability over small things or an unusual urge to withdraw and isolate yourself again. Keeping a simple mood journal for a while can help you track these patterns and identify your specific early warning signs. Recognizing these small personal signals is absolutely essential for intervening early before things snowball into a full-blown episode.
So you know the triggers, you know the signs, then you need the tools.
Exactly.
Third is constructing your flexible coping strategies toolkit. This toolkit shouldn't just have one tool. It needs a range of diverse, pre-planned actions you can draw on depending on the situation and how you're feeling. This could include emotional strategies like journaling, listening to uplifting music, scheduling time for a hobby. Behavioral strategies like going for a short walk, doing a 5-minute mindfulness exercise, reaching out to a friend. Cognitive strategies like actively challenging negative thoughts using a CBT worksheet or app. And professional strategies like having a plan to schedule an extra booster therapy session if needed.
Fourth, activate your support network proactively. Don't wait until you're in crisis. Identify a few trusted people, friends, family members who you feel comfortable talking to. Crucially, inform them about your relapse prevention plan, including your early warning signs, and let them know specifically what kind of support might be helpful from them if they notice those signs reemerging. Maybe it's just checking in more often. Maybe it's encouraging you to use your coping skills. Maybe it's helping you make that call to your therapist. This shares the monitoring burden and creates a team approach.
That makes sense, giving people concrete ways to help.
Yes. And finally, incorporate regular professional check-ins, even when you're feeling well. Think of it like preventative maintenance for your mental health, just like you'd get a regular checkup for your physical health. These check-ins with your therapist or psychiatrist, maybe less frequently than during acute treatment, allow you to fine-tune your strategies, troubleshoot minor emerging challenges, review medication needs if applicable, and reinforce your commitment to wellness before things potentially escalate.
This really reframes the whole concept of self-care, doesn't it? It moves it away from being a sort of optional luxury, like bubble baths, to being a fundamental, non-negotiable component of managing a chronic health condition.
Absolutely. That's the critical shift. Consistent attention to foundational self-care practices builds a robust buffer against stress and helps maintain the gains made during treatment. Things like prioritizing consistent sleep hygiene, maintaining nutrient-dense nutrition, engaging in regular physical activity, practicing mindfulness or other stress reduction techniques, making protected time for enjoyable hobbies or activities, and perhaps setting boundaries around work or digital device. Use these become non-negotiable habits that reinforce positive neurochemical balance and emotional stability.
And to really sustain that wellness long term, the final elements seem to be about powerful mindset shifts, particularly around self-perception and finding purpose. Yes, these internal shifts are crucial for building enduring resilience. Two core mindset shifts highlighted are: first, accepting imperfection and practicing self-compassion. You will have bad days or moments. That is part of being human, and it's certainly part of recovery. A bad day or even a temporary increase in symptoms does not negate all your progress and does not mean you are failing. Learning to treat yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a struggling friend during those times is crucial. View setbacks as learning opportunities, not as evidence of defeat.
Second, actively cultivating meaning and purpose. Depression often leaves people feeling empty or directionless. Intentionally identifying and engaging in activities that give your life intrinsic value and align with your core values, whether that's through work, volunteering, creative pursuits, spirituality, nurturing deep relationships, or learning new things, creates an internal buffer against feelings of emptiness. It provides compelling reasons to engage with life, even when energy or motivation might be low. Purpose fuels persistence. Ultimately, the journey is fundamentally nonlinear. Expect ups and downs. The goal isn't necessarily to eliminate all negative feelings forever, but to build the skills and resilience to navigate them effectively. And celebrating every small victory along the way, getting out of bed on a tough day, sending that difficult email, cleaning that one paintbrush is vital. These small acts accumulate, building true confidence, self-efficacy, and enduring hope.
This has been an incredibly comprehensive deep dive. We've distinguished everyday sadness from a potentially debilitating illness, detailed the wide range of systemic symptoms affecting mind, body, and sleep, and clearly outlined the essential multifaceted approach needed for recovery and building long-term resilience. To synthesize the key points, clinical depression is a persistent, complex, but highly treatable illness, not a reflection of personal weakness or lack of willpower. Effective treatment almost always requires a combination approach. Objective professional guidance, often involving therapy like CBT or IPT, and frequently medication for moderate to severe cases strongly supported by consistent, proactive lifestyle interventions like exercise, nutrition, mindfulness, and routine. And if you're supporting others, focus on validation, empathy, practical assistance, patience, and empowering them to seek expert care while also protecting your own well-being. Remember, seeking help is a profound act of courage, not weakness. And the information you now have provides a much clearer map for the path forward, whether for yourself or someone you care about. But recovery, as the material so powerfully emphasizes, isn't just about eliminating the negative symptoms. It's ultimately about actively building a life that supports your ongoing wellness and cultivating enduring meaning and purpose within it. So, as we wrap up, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought, something to mull over to ensure this knowledge translates into real action for you. What one small, non-negotiable step can you commit to implementing into your daily or weekly routine starting right now, today, or tomorrow to turn one of the strategies we discussed into a concrete piece of your own long-term resilience plan? Whether that's 5 minutes of mindfulness before checking your phone in the morning, scheduling a consistent bedtime tonight, or planning one short walk this week, think small, think actionable, think application. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.